Hi, I'm Rich Dealey here on behalf of Claremont Heritage, and today we're going to be taking an auto tour, a time travel, if you will, and we're going to be visiting with our friend Paul Wheeler, the driver of a 1915 Model T, to take us around Claremont from top to bottom to see some of the aspects of community life, the Claremont colleges, and the citrus industry that helped make the city of Claremont what it is today. The Grove House here at Pitzer College actually was built in another location. And as we'll see in our visit to historic structures throughout Claremont, sometimes an old house can find a new place to live. And this is a wonderful example of what you would have seen all around this area, a Grove House made of wood and these distinctive round rocks, which some people call Claremont potatoes. These round rocks would have been all around the fields. Once they dug them up to plant the citrus groves, they would have needed to do something with them. So you can see in all of the older buildings in town, both walls, sidewalks, and of course, even buildings, which have their foundations made out of these Claremont potato rocks. You can see these rocks are rounded, they're washed, and worn away through a process of erosion from the large mountains that are just north of town. We're here in the citrus grove at Pitzer College today, where we have grapefruit, limes, lemons, and this gives you a sense of what much of the landmass of Claremont would have looked like about 100 years ago. This is a smudge pot. You would have seen many of these in citrus groves all around the Pomona Valley about 100 years ago. And this would have been a way to keep the fruit from freezing on cold winter nights. It would have heated up with some oil. That smoke would have maintained your fruit, your crop, that you would have needed to sell after it was ripe.
Once picked, citrus crops would be brought to packing houses near the railway where workers would clean, sort, wrap, and ship them by rail car to markets throughout the country. Today, the packing house stands as a testament to our citrus heritage.
Today we're here at the Claremont Depot, although not quite the original depot because the first train station built here for the city of Claremont was in 1887. It's not until 1927 that this Spanish Revival style building is constructed here in the heart of the Claremont Village. And as you can see from the other buildings we visited, the Spanish Revival style has lots of ornamentation to give the building the feel that it's been here for a long time. Take a look at the Santa Fe Railway's decorations added here to this building. We have a balcony, not for any practical purpose. We have decorative windows and columns on either side of the doorway. Remember when I talked about hidden history? Well, sometimes history is hidden right in the buildings that we look at. Take a look at this. This door has the symbol of the Santa Fe Railway, which is a cross and a circle built right into the doorways. The Santa Fe Railway, of course, the builders of this Claremont Depot in the 1920s. If you had arrived here in the 1920s, as we did in our time machine, you would walk into this waiting room, get your ticket from the ticket master, and then wait for your train. Let's go on inside. We're now inside the historic waiting room of the Claremont Depot. And in the 1920s and 30s, had you arrived here, maybe by trolley car on First Street or by train from the Santa Fe Railway, you would have initially walked into this room with tiled floors and very, very, very high ceilings. Today, this is a gallery of the Claremont Museum of Art and a great example of what we call adaptive reuse, giving an old building a new job. When you visit this building, you'll notice there are some mysterious components. This right here is a crank with the Santa Fe Railway logo on the wooden knob that controls the large windows. When this was a waiting room, people would wait in here and the heat would rise. And on hot weather days, the station master would be able to open the windows to vent the room. That's one of the reasons why the waiting room has such a tall ceiling. You can see the original ticket window for the Claremont Depot. With its iron gate, the interior room is now a gallery space for the museum and is another great example of using an old building for a new job. Even though the Claremont Depot remains one of the most significant parts of downtown Claremont today, it almost didn't survive. In the 1970s, passenger service ended and the Claremont Depot was boarded up, vandalized, and even small fires were set inside. Thanks to efforts by many Claremont officials, including Councilmember Judy Wright, the building was restored, a plaza was added, and it became the stop for a new Metrolink commuter rail system. Since the 1990s, the Claremont Depot has been right next to the site of the Metrolink commuter railway stop. Today, you can catch the train all the way into Los Angeles or all the way out further east to the city of San Bernardino. On the steps of Sumner House, which is one of the original Pomona College buildings. Believe it or not, this particular building, which is a Victorian style structure, was moved from the city of Pomona all the way to Claremont when the college decided to relocate here. As you can see, this Victorian building boasts beautiful colors and exquisite Victorian details. In addition to the wraparound porch, Sumner House boasts stained glass windows, beautiful outside sconces, and what some people refer to as a painted lady color scheme. Sumner, the original president of Pomona College, had this residence where his family lived. At one time in Pomona College's history, Sumner House was used to house students. Today, it's used for visiting professors and speakers to the college. As the colleges continue to grow, they built more and more buildings. This building, Carnegie Hall, was given to Pomona College by the steel magnate Andrew Carnegie and became a library for both the colleges and the community. Marston Quad is the main quadrangle of Pomona College, the first of the 7 colleges that now make Claremont their home. The one that started it all in the 1880s when they relocated from the city of Pomona here to the city of Claremont. Facing Carnegie Hall is the Bridges Auditorium, built in the 1930s, which houses a large state-of-the-art auditorium for public presentations, plays, and concerts. Claremont's known as the City of Trees in part because of the majestic eucalyptus trees and other large trees planted by some of the early townsfolk. Along College Avenue, you can see them, as well as two fine examples of the Craftsman style. This beautiful Craftsman belongs to the Claremont McKenna College and is where their president resides. This recently restored Craftsman was designed and built by Green & Green, the famous Pasadena architects, and is referred to as the Darling House. In many parts of the village, you might encounter these strange, tall, either stone or metal objects. What were these for? Well, this is where you would tie up your horse. We call these a hitching post in the 19th century. We are here at the top of the foothills, all the way up at the Padua Hills Theater and Dining Room. And as you can see by this sign, this was not just a regular theater, it was a dinner theater where you could come for a meal, meet artists, and experience the Mexican players or Paduanos who spent time researching and then presenting folkloricos and other traditional dances from all regions of Mexico. Take a look at this wall I'm standing next to. You can see those Claremont potato rocks we've talked about already. And if you glance around this area, you will see that we are here primarily because the Garner family wanted an otherworldly experience for their guests. They wanted them to feel like they'd been transported to old Spain. So let's take a look at some of the architectural details here at the Padua Hills Theater. Imagine you were a guest here in the 1930s at the Padua Hills Theater. As you walked up through the walkway, you might have been greeted by a member of the Mexican players, offered a drink, and you might have had a chance to gaze at this beautiful statue here, a sculpture by Albert Stewart, a local Pomona Valley artist who lived just down the street from this beautiful theater. It's called Indian Maiden, and it's a good time to acknowledge that before any Europeans, Asians, or Africans came to this region, this was the land of the Tongva people. If you visit the Padua Hills Theater today, you can still see the tortilla oven that was used starting in the 1930s to warm your tortillas if you were a guest of the dinner theater. You might have enjoyed a tortilla outside here on the patio. In the 1930s and 40s, and even into the 1950s, the Mexican players and the staff would entertain you on this great patio, which has been restored to its original grandeur. You can now have your special event here in what once was the outside to the Padua Hills Dinner Theater. When Marston and Maybury designed this complex in the late 1920s and 30s for the Garner family, they wanted it to feel like a world away, which is why the Garner family used a lot of the pasture lands that they owned north of the city. And if you look out over the valley, as we can today, you can see not only the houses of Villa Padova, but also the homes of many of the original people who came and settled this area in the 1930s. After dinner, you might come out to the back patio where you would see some of the amazing views of the valley below. The Padua Hills Theater operated from 1930 all the way up until the early 1970s. And by 1974, with artists leaving and the dinner theater business no longer successful, it was closed. For many years, the building stood vacant. Sometimes, history doesn't have a happy ending. The beautiful Padua Hills Theater complex has been fully restored, but the structure that once accommodated a lot of the living quarters here at the Padua Hills Theater was abandoned and for many years let go to the point that it could not be saved and had to be demolished. It's important to give old buildings a new job, which is why Claremont Heritage believes that visiting these structures and coming up with new jobs for an old building are the key to saving our community's history. We're here in front of the historic Garner House. The Garner family, one of the most successful Claremont families in the early 20th century, who owned the property that we visited when we saw the Padua Hills Theater and that whole Via Padova neighborhood. They also owned a company called Vortox and a very large piece of property along Indian Hill Boulevard, which is today Memorial Park. The home, as you can see, is also done in Spanish Revival style and was their home until 1946. I'm standing, believe it or not, on the music balcony where Bess Garner would feature talented local musicians who would play not only the piano but even the harp for her dinner and evening guests. Below me is the grand living room. As restored by Claremont Heritage, looks much the same way as it would have when the Garner family lived here. It features furniture that would have been used by the Garner family themselves or furniture that matches what we know belonged to them during this time. Ted Garner, who grew up in this home from 1926 to 1946, pointed out that it had a wonderful tower for the kids to look out on the citrus grove. But this house has more than that. In addition to this interesting music balcony feature, it also has a lot of callbacks to an earlier era. Though this house was very modern in its time, it had forced heating, and there are wall sconces in all of the rooms, and these wonderful old exposed beams to give it the sense that it was a Mexican rancho house. We're here in the kitchen of the Garner house, which would have been staffed by a maid back in the 1920s and 30s. Here you can see the stove that looks much like the one that would have been here during the time the Garners were in residence. This home is now the offices of Claremont Heritage and a museum. I wanted to point out what you would have seen in the way of a brand new refrigerator in the 1920s. Prior to this time period, they used ice boxes which relied on a regular supply of ice brought by the Iceman. Unlike most kitchens, the Garner family kitchen features a little waiter door where the staff could pass dinner plates with food into the dining room, which directly adjacent to this room. In the back of the Garner house is a beautiful patio, which today can be used for events and parties. As mentioned, Claremont Heritage operates offices here at the Garner house. So this is a building that's owned by the city that can still be visited and used by all of the people today. It's another example of what we call adaptive reuse, giving an old building a new job. It's worth mentioning that after the Garner family sold their home, this became a park, a memorial park. It was named such in 1948 for the people who had passed away, fighting in both World War I and World War II. As you can see here in this marker, featuring some of those Claremont potato-style rocks we talked about earlier.